issue. This is the issue that sort of caught my attention and millions of people around the world. American Brock Turner was convicted recently of sexual assault. He was drunk when he attacked a woman he met at a party. Now, the judge sentenced him to 6 months prison. I think it's gone down to 4 months. His defence was that she consented. It's pretty shocking news, 6 months sentence. What do you think about this? I mean, how can, with regards to consent, let's start with you, Jenny. With regards to consent, how can we teach young men to change, do you think?
If I can just talk a little bit about the Brock Turner. So how is it possible that a woman who was unconscious could have given consent? I don't think she did give consent. When we look at New Zealand's record, we have one of the highest rates of sexual violence in this country. So when I read what happened in the United States, I was outraged, but you know, we should also be outraged about what's happening right here in New Zealand. How can we teach our young people to know more about consent? I think that there are two things. We could actually start by teaching them at home, but also I think the educational system has a role to play. And they are beginning to do that in primary schools. I know that my daughter, who is now 12, they started having some lessons last year when she was 11. Around consent? It was about sexual health in general. It wasn't actually about consent, but I think it needs to be taught.
This was an issue too, wasn't it, Fletcher, with the Roastbusters issue? And how can we teach our young men better values, particularly around the issue of consenting? Yeah. What do you reckon?
I asked myself the question. I went around the caucus and said, what is it about young men, and do we need to teach them consent? And the question, I put it back to you, as a young man, like, you know, as a kid growing up, did you need to be told that taking advantage of a woman was a bad thing?
That's a good question.
That's how we grew up. That's how any good, decent person grew up. And yes, actually, it is curriculum in the schools. Consent as a conversation around sex came in, I think, 2013.
Matt, what about you? Do you think that teaching consent in schools should be compulsory? Because right now it's non-compulsory, and what Jenny is saying there, that if you've got a daughter, there is a 1 in 3 chance that she will have been or will be the victim of unwanted sexual encounters by 16. What do you think? Should it be compulsory?
Well, I think, Wallace, this is a very serious subject and we should have zero tolerance for it.
So should it be compulsory in schools?
There are educational programs in the schools under sex education around consent. You distributed that short video from the British PSA, the public service announcements around how to have a cup of tea, and it was a great way to translate that message to age-specific messages. I think young people pick up on it. So it's not only the school, as we've talked about, but also parents as well. Parents need to be talking about it with their kids and talking to them through the issues of consent. But I think Fletcher hit the nail on the head around, you know, how much should we be teaching, and punishment should be part of this as well.
Right, okay, let's go to Ali.
We've got Fiona here from the Sexual Abuse Prevention Network. Your job is to go into schools and talk to kids about the issue of consent. What do you tell teens?
Yeah, so we go into high schools in Wellington, and there are a number of organisations that go into schools around the country and talk to young people. We talk to them about how they can recognise when someone is consenting to sex and what a healthy relationship looks like. So it's really important to talk to young people about what the good stuff is and what they should be wanting and what they should be doing, as well as what the bad stuff is. So we talk to them about how they can recognise consent. So if someone is initiating contact with them, if they're making eye contact, if they look happy, talking about all these kinds of body languages. And then we also talk about how they might communicate that they're not into it. So it's a bit more complex than just no means no.
What kind of ideas do our teens have about consent in the area of sex?
Well, young people and adults in New Zealand have a huge number of different messages coming to them about consent and about sexual violence. Unfortunately, there are a lot of really harmful messages in the mainstream conversations. There's a lot of victim blaming that's normalised and slut shaming that's normalised, and we've seen that a lot with the Brock Turner case in the last week. So there are also a lot of young people who have a really strong analysis of sexual violence and have really good knowledge of what consent is as well.
The Brock Turner case, what does that do for raising the conversation to a much higher level in terms of this issue?
It does mean people are talking a lot more about sexual violence. It does raise awareness, but it's really important to remember that this is just one incident, and that in New Zealand we have 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 to 10 men, and 1 in 2 trans people experiencing sexual violence in their lifetime. So it's not an isolated incident. This kind of thing is happening every day.
So we're talking about instituting cultural change, which takes a long time. Back to you, Wallace.
Okay, very, very good indeed. And I want to sort of get some audience reaction about this, but I just want to ask you, where did we go wrong, Fisher? Where do you think, what happened? Because as you were saying, I mean, I think that I know the boundaries around consent, but is it something that's happening to our younger people, or what's going wrong in society, do you think?
I think I just want to point out at this stage, there's a hashtag from a whole lot of women's association from around the world saying, not all men. So let's kind of start from that frame point that we're talking about a group of men who they need either help or they need to be stopped straight away. And the conversation is a very, very difficult one to be honest.
It's quite complex. I mean, what is consent? I mean, no means no. I mean, why is that so hard to understand, perhaps?
I don't think it's hard to understand no means no, but the question is, are our young men hearing the no, and do they actually, take the right actions when a woman says no, that they actually don't mean for them to do whatever it is that they would like to do?
All right. Hey, I just want a quick response, Ali, just from the audience on this consenting issue.
Okay, who would like to talk to this one? Hi, how are you? What's your name?
Ratu.
Ratu?
Yep.
Do you think more work needs to be done in this area in terms of raising awareness around consent?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the message that's not getting through, though?
Well, with Brock Turner, one of these things, unfortunately, when people get intoxicated, it's always going to be really, really complicated. And just to start off, what I think we need to, if a guy gets into a situation like that, he needs to understand that if he's not making every single effort to gain consent, then he's got anything that comes to him coming in a court, right? So if a court wants to ping him for rape, then he should have been a lot more explicit with the consent that he tried to get.
So this is something that men need to be aware of, and when they go out at night, this is something that needs to be one on their checklist as far as, when you don't drink, drive, and consent as something that is signalled has to be watched out for.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Ratu.